I've taken my kids to Wembley twice. Our leaving memory was to walk past a very large Everton fan urinating against the side of Wembley. Why is he urinating against the side of the building, Dad? That's what we do, son. Knobs out.
We walked to Wembley Central, and there was a big kind of old abandoned warehouse with a load of people standing outside urinating. And Ed went, "Oh, Dad, that's good, isn't it? They've got little walls where you can go to the toilets."
We've just unleashed thousands of Americans who will go over to Wembley. We'll just think you can just urinate everywhere. Please don't do it, America.
It's a free zone.
We back like St. John's basketball. And what a weekend of football in which we drank every last drop of sweet, sweet Carabao amidst near mystical scenes at Wembley. Liverpool's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week continued as they lost to Newcastle United, who won a domestic trophy for the first time in 70 long years. Great London lager shortage of 2025 incoming. Arsenal beat Chelsea in a game which was honestly harder to watch than Bill Belichick at the beach. Manchester City drew with Brighton, a team whose joy seemed set at Parker Posey gap ad levels. Another Everton parade will be required to be scheduled to celebrate yet another last-minute wonder goal, wonder draw. And to break it all down, it is a joy to welcome from The Athletic, a gent who's a ball knower at Chalamet levels. It's my friend, the Oracle of Yorkshire. It's Mr. Rory Smith.
I'm slightly hoarse today, Rog. Slightly hoarse.
I like it. I've got to say, whatever you're working with, late night DJ, smooth jazz Rory Smith is one of my top 3 Rory Smith.
For reasons that we will come on to, I am slightly hoarse. I apologise.
Is it anything to do with the fact that you are fresh back from Naples, or did the whole area smell of Antonio Conte's cologne?
Just screaming constantly about the quality of the food. I did have, I had 2 delightful days in Naples plus an extra day in Pescara, eating some of the best calamari I've ever eaten, interviewing a few footballers. It was a good week.
How tall are the Scott McTominay statues? I believe they've erected just outside of Pompeii.
They would struggle to be as tall as the actual Scott McTominay, who was one of the players I saw. He's a very sort of imposing individual, as we have seen in Serie A this season. A pasty-faced hero for the new Naples, Scott McTominay.
Was he welcoming, or is he like, why would this man come from Yorkshire to be with? Did he keep you at arm's distance?
No. He was really, really warm. I saw him and Billy Gilmour, who's the former Chelsea and Brighton midfielder, who's there as well.
One of the top 10 footballers whose voice is not yet broken. Little Billy Gilmour.
Billy Gilmour has got such doleful eyes, Rog. That's what I can tell you about Billy Gilmour. Really doleful eyes.
He looks like he's like a top 10 footballer also who would be cast in a epic First World War trench movie. Little Billy Gilmour would just have that scene where he looks up at you with consumption before you go over the top.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could also put him in kind of a supporting role in a rom-com, I think. The Unlucky in Love best friend, maybe, for Billy Gilmour.
God bless. Find your love, Billy Gilmour. Call us now, 646-450-9472. You're through to the Billy Gilmour Finds Love line. But how are the Scots boys? This is a serious question. How are the Scots boys taking to Napoli? Are they just pretending that they're waking up every day in Dundee, and because there's so many Italians in Scotland? But by the way, true fact, huge number came over in the 1920s to set up pretty well every ice cream parlour you'll encounter in Glasgow. Hence all the famous Scottish people named Armando Iannucci and Lewis Capaldi. How are they taking to Italy? Whereas like when we grew up in the 80s and 90s, Ian Rush is, I think, apocryphally said to have quipped about his doomed year away from Liverpool in Juventus. It's like living in a foreign country.
I think Billy Gilmour and Scott McTominay are very much enjoying living in what is very much a foreign country. They were both really warm, really happy. You can tell they're kind of effusive about the city, about the club. They didn't have a great result this weekend in Serie A, and Napoli losing a bit of ground on Inter in the title race. But they seem genuinely to be buzzing to be there. They have a really sweet relationship between the two of them.
Do they share a pad? Is it like Scottish Bert and Ernie in Napoli? Is like 2 little single beds?
Not quite. I think they live relatively close by, and they do sit next to each other in the changing room, and even on the road when they're in away dressing rooms, they sit next to each other.
Man spreading in their kilts.
There was a point where Scott McTominay, who I didn't in England didn't necessarily have a reputation for being a particularly kind of forthcoming talker, maybe wrongly, gave me a good 2 minutes of content on how much he loves Italian tomatoes.
Serious?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how much Scott McTominay loves tomatoes in Italy, which is odd, Rog, because in Britain he doesn't eat them.
Did he break it down like Alice Cooper in Wayne's World? Was he like, well, you've got your run-of-the-mill tomato in England, but here you've got... Did he give you like the 13 kinds of Italian tomatoes and just suddenly...
You've got San Marzano.
You got your Common Garden San Marzano. You've got your San Marzano from Sicily, where they used a volcanic rock to let the pungency ripen.
He was wide-eyed with enthusiasm about Italian tomatoes. And at that point, Billy Gilmore, and I will do a Scottish accent here, sort of turned to me with those doleful eyes and went, the thing about Scotty really likes his food. It was a lovely moment. I had a nice time.
You know who else likes his food? Rory Smith.
I do. I had an amazing meal, Rog. I've got another recommendation for Naples for you.
By the way, I just want to give some context to listeners of this show. When Rory and I do European nights, we actually close the show ritually. I think it's become listeners' favourite part, where Rory gives one of his recommendations from the hundreds of cities he travels to across Europe while chasing the Champions League, the Europa League, and our beloved Conference League. And when I was in Naples last year, I went on Rory's recommendation to Concertina Tresanti. I had the 13-course pizza tasting menu. I hate tasting menus. This, though, is my death row meal for two reasons. Number one, it was like a slice of heaven, pizza like I've never had before. It was life-changing. I mean this sincerely, it was life-changing. Number two, it went on forever. Effectively, it would work like a death sentence commutation. So what was the best dish you, Rory Smith, ate on this trip? Because some of the photographs you sent me just looked divine.
Well, I had a brilliant pasta amatriciana in Rome, which is the kind of one of the four typical Roman pasta dishes. But my good friend Roberto, who was the source of the Concertina recommendation, took me to a place called Diedo. Now, if you didn't name a restaurant anything in Naples, call it Diedo. But it's not for that one. It's because the chef is called Diedo, although he is named for Maradona.
So he says it's like opening a restaurant in Liverpool and calling it Hibbo.
Exactly. People would go.
They would.
Diedo it works exclusively with local fish and seafood. It's all bought fresh from the market that day. There was some calamari, which was the nicest calamari I've ever eaten. I love calamari, and it was just remarkable. There was a dish of like a mixed pasta with seafood that's cooked in a broth, which is so good that when a rather more kind of famous diner than me, Stanley Tucci, had it earlier this year, it brought him to tears, and I can recommend it.
Did it really? Because everything that Stanley Tucci eats, he always goes, oh, God. Everything, puts it in his mouth. He just says, oh, God.
My name's Stanley Tucci. I'm Italian on both sides. But the thing that the star of the show for me, it was all delicious. It's called Diedo. Go if you're in Naples. It's incredible. Be respectful of the local area, because there's a lot of tourists in Naples at the moment, of which I was one. It's a problem. But they just brought us a huge bit of octopus, beautifully grilled on an artichoke. I don't really like artichokes, Rog. And Roberto said, do you want the artichoke? And I said, not sure. Not my favourite thing in the world. Turns out that, like Scott McTominay, who had the false impression of what tomatoes are meant to taste like because he eats British tomatoes, I didn't realise that artichokes are delicious. I don't know what they'd done to it. I think it had some cheese in it. It was extraordinary. Artichoke, bit of octopus, a little bit of oil, nice on the grill. It was heaven.
God, you know what? It's actually like, I don't love truffle in America. It's like a Xerox of a truffle by the time it gets it. Sometimes when you do, it's like drinking a Guinness in Ireland. To have an artichoke in Naples. You actually sent me a photo that made my day. Tommaso, the legendary Napoli coffee man who served the coffee for Maradona. And I just thought that you've got to see this photograph that Rory sent of this beautiful man with just the most perfectly happy stomach in Naples Atleta leisure wear. It just looked so curved and just radiantly joyful. And I just thought that man has made Maradona's espresso, and now he's making milky tea, 2 sugars for Billy Gilmore. I just thought that to me is the circle of life.
Tommaso is a Naples institution. He's been making coffee for the squad, for the players, for the staff for at least 40 years. I didn't realise this. He drives an hour every day there and back to get to the training ground, which is just outside Naples.
By the looks of him, that's his exercise.
That is his exercise. But I was really keen to learn Tommaso's secrets, because his coffee is legendarily good. And I also own a stovetop, a little Mocha stovetop. And I said to him, Tommaso, how do you do it? What is it to do with the way you heat it? Do you turn it off at a certain point to get that really sort of perfect roast kind of taste? And it turns out that Tommaso's secret is he just puts loads of coffee in. Just loads of coffee.
That's so funny.
Like, I do it in the morning for me and my wife, and I'm kind of carefully levelling it off. None of that business with Tommaso. Piles it in, huge mound, it's all spilling over, shoves the top on, off you go.
God, that is the making good coffee equivalent of fixing your computer by just turning it on and off. Just shovel loads in there.
More coffee. What you need here is more coffee.
And that is the end of the good part of the podcast, listeners, because we're about to pivot. I don't want to, because I want to ask far more about Tommaso's approach to life, Scott McTominay's approach to Italian agricultural product, and so much more. But we do have a lot of football to get to. So, Raw, let's dive in. And I want to start with a toast. I want to raise my third first Michelet Ultra of the day to an Italian story, the great Dele, who substituted in, and I watched with a tear in my eye for his debut for Como in the 81st minute against AC Milan in Serie A. It was immensely emotional to watch this gent who has been so dominant, who has soared, who has fallen, been through so much injury, a total free-fall collapse of form. So many mental demons that came with being sexually abused as a kid. So he talked about quite openly in his darkest hours. So to see him return to make his first appearance in 748 days was genuinely stirring to the soul. I will say his arrival was a little bit Grandpa Simpson at the bar. He was in and he was out. He got sent off, I think, within 10 minutes in second half stoppage time for a fairly rash challenge on Ruben Loftus-Cheek. It was quite a surreal scene because even Milan's Carl Walker begged the referee not to go through it, which is really beautiful. And I just want to, in these days of challenge, start by reinforcing the positive of the story. Welcome Dele back, even as I acknowledge that it's hard to get the Everton off you once it settles. It's like being sprayed by a skunk. So welcome back, Dele, and to better, much better footballing days ahead, Rule.
Yeah, you hope that Dele's got a final act in his career. It's forgotten now, it's overlooked a little bit because of everything that's happened to him since his kind of peak, but Dele was an incredible talent, and he deserves to be remembered that way rather than as a kind of lost boy of English football. So hopefully, yeah, the slight false start element is forgotten. He thrives with Como next season, and we see the best version of Dele one last time.
We had Dele on just after he'd scored that goal against Crystal Palace, and he was such an effusive wonder of just promise. I mean, that lost boy moniker, may he shuck it, may he soar again. There's a lot of life and there's a lot of people who are rooting for him. Godspeed. A quick plug before we begin. Atlanta, we're coming for you next Tuesday night. Georgia, not Bergamo. Me and Rory will be doing Rory coming to the United States, doing a live taping at the Brewhouse Cafe in Atlanta, which was only just voted by 23,000 of you listeners as America's best soccer bar of the year. Come and be with us. More details on our social. I can't wait, Raw, just to be with you in that fantastic city. Will be the joy of joys. Also this, we're investing a lot of time in our newsletter operation. What we found is it's the finest way to communicate directly with you in this very post-Twitter world where everyone's screaming and shouting and conspiracy theorying. We just want to go direct, commune directly with you. So if you listen to anything on the Men in Blazers Media Network, subscribe to our newsletter, The Raven, which lands in inboxes every Monday and Friday. Be part of the largest MIB community. Start your week off right with our recap of the games over the weekend, and look at those you might want to block your calendar off while you're at work. Also, my latest thoughts on Everton's performance. Subscribe to the link in the show notes. We'll see you on Friday when we preview the weekend. Remember, you can always reach out to me and Rory at meninblazers@gmail.com. We really live to hear from you. We've got a beautiful letter to close this show. But let's start with the Cup of Carabao that overfloweth at Wembley. Liverpool 1. What? Is this a spelling mistake? Newcastle 2? I mean, before kick-off, this did feel like a story of excess of glory against complete abject woeful scarcity. Raw. League-leading Liverpool, they'd won at their last 4 visits to the great Wembley Stadium. Newcastle, honestly, serial doom livers. 9 straight losses at that famed stadium. Really Groundhog Day of doom. I think we heard about that maybe 87 times during the match broadcast. 70 long years since they'd last won domestic silverware. And I'll say, even as an Everton fan, I was like, oh, that's a long time. The Times of London worked out that 48,795,764 fans have gone through St James's Park turnstile since Newcastle's last major trophy. That's a lot of bloody shattered hope. From Liverpool's POV, it was Arne Slot's first chance at silverware. Take us back before kick-off, Raw. Where did you watch? How did you brace up to this emotionally? And after that shock, self-soiling against PSG at Anfield, when your Reds were Donnaruma'd, or were they Darwin Núñez? It's hard to tell. Did this, as being Liverpool used to tell us, did this mean more?
I think from my vantage point, Roger, it probably meant less, and that was the problem. So I watched it from the east stand of Wembley Stadium with my son.
Oh, bless. Now you've got me all sympathetic, you bastard. You've taken away my ability to gloat.
We were high up in the top tier of Wembley, which was, I think, basically where we watched it from last year when obviously Liverpool beat Chelsea in the Carabao Cup final. And in London yesterday, on the way to the stadium, which is kind of a 20-minute, half-an-hour journey, then you obviously have to walk around Wembley. Two things were quite noticeable. One was there seemed to be a lot more black and white shirts than red ones, which was natural. I think a lot of Newcastle fans had made the journey down, made a weekend of it, wanted to be together to kind of commune with their fellow fans. But around Wembley in particular, and especially when we got into the Liverpool end, it was very subdued. There were quite a lot of empty seats around us right up until kind of 10 minutes before kick-off. People were chatting amiably, perfectly happy, no kind of discontent, obviously. But it felt very low-key. And then you looked out across Wembley to the other side of the stadium, and it was a sea of black and white scarves. There was twirling, there was waving, there was singing and dancing and general sort of revelry. And it gave me, and I think this is not hindsight talking, it gave me a slight sense of unease because, to be honest, my main priority on the day had been making sure my son got to Wembley safely. That was my priority. I had to look after him, make sure he was okay on the train and stuff. And then we got in, and for the first time I really thought about the game, and I thought, those people over there, they look like this is much more important to them than it is to these people around me. And if the players have the same approach, we might have a problem.
And your son just said, Dad, don't worry about me. I'm just kind of trying to keep these 12 ales down. But of course, talking about great under-sevens, future star.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an important part of the day is getting an under-7 to drink heavily, Rog.
Yeah.
Now, he was taking it all in.
And you were like, at the end, I imagine you being like, son, this feeling we're feeling here, let's never feel it again.
Channel it.
Yeah, channel it in the under-7s league.
You take this and you make it your fuel.
Yeah, exactly. Watch out, other under-7s. And your son's just like, oh, this is my first hangover. But we got a lot to get to before we break down your beautiful, beautiful child's first night on the bevies. But the early play ran up and down that Liverpool right. Newcastle left. Newcastle looked so perky from the off. Tonali particularly was endeavour-filled. Snapped at Liverpool with no respect. It was open. It was heavy armour. It's pretty grapple. Newcastle were edging it. We've got to say that Liverpool, that vaunted midfield, looked very heavy-legged from the off. McAllister, Szoboszlai's headband, the longer the season goes on, it looks ever higher up. It's as if he's wearing a piece of Andre Agassi's stick-on hair at this point. And poor Gravenberch looked knackered. Newcastle began to really assert themselves. They won corner after corner. I think there have been two in which someone thought it was wise that 5'9" Alexis McAllister was responsible for marking the giant slab of granite that is 6'6" Dan Burn on the third. Trippier's corner met with a thunderous headbutt by Dan Burn. Cue explosive noise audible right here in New York. It was like a thumping drive of a header. Went in on the bounce. And honestly, this was magic in itself. Newcastle's first goal at Wembley since 1976. And it has to be said. I don't know if you felt it in the moment. You probably felt an agony. But it was beautiful. It was big Dan Burn, the local boy. A totem of all that is good about that area, who scored it. In a week, he got his first bloody England call-up. He's 32 years of age. Childhood Newcastle supporter. This story is well worn at this point. Came through at the Newcastle Academy. I think it was an agony for him. Heartbreak at aged 11. Was kicked out. Had really a journeyman's career to begin with. Played non-league with Darlington, Fulham, Wigan, Brighton. Really a late bloomer. To have the perseverance, the determination to find a way back home to Newcastle, almost like a salmon swimming upstream. There's a beautiful letter, find it, circulating from his dad to Dan, written before their last Wembley final, which they lost, which ended, "That'll be my lad, my Dan on the world stage, showing who he is, a great footballer and an even better bloke." It's a lovely letter, stunningly inspirational. I am dead inside, but I found it beautiful, raw. His moment, his joy, watching a human become a legend of eternal folklore on a football field before our eyes.
Yeah, even obviously you're watching it as a fan, and there was disappointment within the Liverpool, and no real, I think devastation is probably pushing it, but there was a sense of kind of frustration. It was at that point that the goal arrived, when you'd started to think, okay, they can get to half-time. Just get to half-time, 0-0. The first half has been poor, not disastrous. I thought that although Newcastle were clearly on top, there weren't that many chances in that first half, and you could see a world in which Liverpool improved considerably in the second half and won. So you're dealing with all of that, but at the same time, it's impossible not to be pleased for Dan Burn. And I think we forget that in a world that is kind of overly run by the sentiments you see on social media. That's not really how people interact with each other. And although I'm not going to pretend that anyone in the Liverpool end turned around and said, well, I'm just really pleased for Dan Burn. I think most fans understand some element of his story. They realise that it's a hometown kid scoring for his hometown club. And it's really hard not to feel some kind of, pleasure's maybe pushing it, but yeah, you feel a little bit of sweetness that football does produce those moments.
There is a tiny bit of sweetness that football still can, amidst all of the commercial glut. That it was epic. It really was. I mean, the Aeneid writ large in football cleats, and I don't like to be hyperbolic, but I am also sorry to be that guy. But I have to ask you, Raw, Kelleher in goal, slightly slow to the ball, in because #Carabao lineup. Got to ask you, does Alisson save that?
I don't know. I think there's two kind of question marks over that goal, and they're both understandable on kind of a human level. One is that, yeah, you play Kelleher because he's the Carabao Cup goalkeeper, and you have to show faith in him. He was the goalkeeper who won the cup for Liverpool last year. Could he have saved it? Possibly. Yeah. I mean, it's not right in the corner, as you say. It kind of went in on the bounce. And the other is the McAllister marking Dan Burn issue, which, even in the stadium at the time, you were like, hang on, why is he marking Dan Burn, especially in the second half when he kept marking Dan Burn? But at the same time, and I think Slot explained this afterwards, Dan Burn was 15 yards out. It's really hard to score a header from 15 yards out. And I think his thinking was, yes, he's clearly dangerous. They're almost obviously aiming for Dan Burn at the far post. But if we take Virgil van Dijk or Ibrahima Konate out, then that messes up our whole system. And I think from a coaching point of view, you can kind of understand why he thought, okay, this is not ideal, but the chances of him scoring from 15 yards with a header are very slim. And they are very slim. He just happened to do it.
Two questions coming back after the break. How would Liverpool respond? And also Newcastle, they've been ahead in 6 of the last 12 games against the Reds and not won a single one of them. You've watched flat Liverpool first halves a number of times this season. We believe Arne Slot will make second half tactical adjustments. I've got to be honest, I was surprised that there were no substitutions for Liverpool at half time. Newcastle seemed honestly defiant and unafraid because of it. Watching a collection of the Joe Linton cover tackles in this game, I would watch that on repeat because, my God, they fostered belief. Set pieces were the place where that Newcastle belief often turned into reality. Isaac had a goal written off for offside from a corner, but then Livramento cross, Murphy headed down, Kelleher full stretch pushed away, but it had to be him. Isaac pouncing smoothly, lashing, smashing home, delirium. Your missing piece, Arsenal fans, doing the goals. Hearing those Geordie voices sing around Wembley, I don't know what it felt like inside of Wembley, but it was beautiful. Tears from grown men all over that stadium who had not seen their team win in their lifetimes, in their parents' lifetimes, for many of them. Miguel Delaney tweeted something fascinating. He said, striking how one game, although really it's been a few weeks of flatness, can make you go, Liverpool are in great shape and cruising to at least 4 of that starting 11 needs to be replaced. And you know, you saw it crackle on social media. Jota suddenly flat, Luis Diaz off it. Some fans suddenly angry at Salah having 0 shots, 0 chances created in a game. I mean, this was an exhausted looking Liverpool team. I think they played 9 more games than Newcastle this season. Did you see the fatigue? The general gasness Or was it something more? Was it a residue of the PSG loss, like the mental toll that it took on the Liverpool side, who, let's be honest, had arrived till this week in this season relatively drama-free?
Yeah, and that's been kind of the hallmark of the season, that Liverpool have cruised is pushing it, but they've seemed unruffled where everybody else has had this kind of emotional, physical fraughtness. Liverpool have just been like, okay, we'll go and play some football matches. I think what you saw were kind of three things. One is that Slot has not rotated a lot this season. That kind of core team, McAllister, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai in midfield in particular, has played a lot of football, and certainly in Gravenberch's case, a lot more football than he's probably used to from the last 2 or 3 years of his career. And I think over the last month or so, you're starting to look at them and think, yeah, they're kind of winding down a bit here. I personally wonder whether what's happened is the run of 5 Premier League games in February that they had to get through to have this big lead in the league. I think they got through that much better than most people anticipated, and there has then been a hangover, much like the one my child has suffered from this morning. This is a joke, by the way. My son didn't drink anything. Just to absolutely be clear on this, he's given up juice for Lent. So he only drank water yesterday. He's given up juice for Lent.
God.
Which is good.
Not the ales, though, right?
He's still on the side. I think they got through that run of 5 games, and they are now paying that price effectively, because they were very passive against PSG in the first leg. They were poor against Southampton in the league in between the Champions League games. The second leg against PSG, they were better, but playing obviously a top class team. And then against Newcastle, they did seem really flat and unable to lift themselves, which was the difference. And I think a lot of it is because Slot's not rotated. I agree. I suspect there was a psychological hangover, maybe a physical one as well, from the fact that PSG went the distance on Tuesday night. And those two things combined with the factor number 3, Newcastle are really physically intense. They are big and they're imposing and they're energetic and they're dynamic and they snap into tackles and they're aggressive in a really positive way. And Liverpool, tired, sort of a little bit weary from all that they've done this season, they never really looked like they were capable of dealing with it, to be perfectly honest.
On came Curtis Jones and Darwin Núñez. Funny enough, the two gents who had wilted in the crucible of the penalty shootouts midweek. Curtis Jones had a smash, which I love watching. Nick Pope just wafted it away with a casual brilliance with his giant mitt. Liverpool had no chance but to push forward. Newcastle honestly thrive under those circumstances. They have the need for speed. They seem to break at will. Really incredible for spells to watch Liverpool, Slot's Liverpool, look at times desperate. They did conjure a late Chiesa goal deep into injury time. I think probably thousands of Liverpool fans had already left. It was nervy because Newcastle. By the way, got to credit so much elite shithousery down the stretch. I mean, it was just kicking off those last 3 minutes. The chest bump between Tonali, I think was it Callum Wilson? Was it Joe Willock when they won a corner to kill the game off? To me, that was my moment of the game. But Newcastle held on. And they won their first domestic trophy in 70 long years since there's a cursed story, a group of travellers are said to have cursed Newcastle shortly after they won their last trophy. I think it was the FA Cup, was it? They were evicted from the training ground right after the players got back and cursed the team. This is the seismic nature of what we saw. It's essentially the English equivalent of the Billy Goat curse being lifted from the Cubs. First trophy of any kind. They won a bauble in 1969, something called the Intercity Fairs Cup, which was designed by UEFA, I crap you not, to, quote, boost trade fairs. I think 30 other English clubs have won something since then. Newcastle are a big club, massive town, a proud town. They've not been amongst them. I want to talk about this first purely from a footballing perspective, Ro. I mean, we know Big Dan Burn is now, transcendent, a demigod, a local hero. Eddie Howe, huge respect. First English manager to win a domestic trophy since 2008, which is another story and incredible when you think about that. For him, just his second win in 22 games against Liverpool. Remember, that man was on thin ground in November in that club. He's now a winner. But most of all, I think of the fans, always the fans, Toon fans. I think rough translation to the Bills Mafia, as English football will ever have. They are delirious. There was a tifo in last week's Champions League game. I think the Atletico fans put it out last week. which reminded me of Newcastle's agony and love. They put it out before the Real Madrid loss. It said, "It kills me, it gives me life." And Newcastle fans have lived that. That city has struggled so bloody much as any city in England has post-industrially. It was a coal town. It was a shipbuilding town. It's a proud town, as I said. Vast unemployment, huge amount of social struggle. Football has become its everything. The stadium in the centre of the city where most urban planners put their cathedral. They had to struggle through dark days of terrible owners. But they've won something for the first time in 3 generations now. Raw, that's the true joy of this day, right? Watching this team. These players become forever legends. But most of all, these fans, you watch them with your own eyes. At long last, have their day.
Yeah, and do you know what? The side of the country I live on is much closer to Newcastle than it is to Liverpool. So when we got the train back last night, my son learnt some words that he really shouldn't hear. But there were quite a lot of Newcastle fans on, as well as a smattering of Liverpool fans. And I didn't hear a single kind of rough word between them. There was absolutely no kind of bitterness or no allegations of, shithousery or kind of cheating or you didn't deserve it or if we'd played better. It was purely and simply you were the better team, and an awful lot of we're quite pleased for you because we understand how long you've gone without a trophy. We think it's funny when it's Everton, but we understand it must be painful for other teams. Newcastle are not, this will get me in trouble, Newcastle historically aren't an especially big club. Not really. They are one of the bigger clubs in England. They have, a similar history overall to, I don't know, Sunderland, which won't be popular. But, they're a team they've had patches of success in their history, but they've never been a kind of giant, an unmatched giant of the game like Manchester United were in the 1990s and 2000s. What they are, though, is they're a big city club. There's an awful lot of passion that goes into that team. There's no other football team in Newcastle. There is a rugby team, but it's a minority pursuit. Newcastle as a city looks at St James's Park for its kind of emotional state, its emotional well-being, and all of that is channeled into games like yesterday, and sometimes, as it was 2 years ago when they lost the Carabao Cup final to a much worse Manchester United team than this Liverpool team, it becomes kind of overbearing and overwhelming. But I think yesterday they harnessed it, and they seem to feed on that energy. And what's most impressive about the coaching job that Eddie Howe has done at Newcastle is that he has given a team that has been constructed quite expensively. Newcastle have not held back in the transfer market, whatever their fans say about PSR. He has given a team a real identity, which is tough in itself, but he's given them an identity that fits with the city. And I think that is an incredible piece of work.
By the way, Scousers and Geordies, Newcastle denizens, as well as Glaswegians, always seem to get on, often, I think, because of their love of football and the way their cities have been shaped or essentially in the post-industrial era been battered by the economic realities of Britain. So that train ride, I wasn't on it, but I've been on it, and there is a lot of love and a lot of mutual respect there. But we do need to acknowledge one thing, which is Newcastle's nation-state ownership, which underpins all of this. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund took over the team October, was it 2021? Essentially to use the club as a front, like a Live Golf or a Ronaldo to the Saudi League kind of prop, which we've got to acknowledge. There's a massive feel-good nature at the moment, but the duality, the cognitive dissonance almost has to kick in, because this Newcastle victory it's really become the whole point of a sports washing initiative to seize these feel-good moments, make them seem magical, inject the rebranding of the nation state into them. We did a whole podcast series on this subject. If you want to know more, listen to it, World Corrupt Season 2. But Raw, how do you square that circle? Because football's never very good at squaring any circle that makes you try and hold the emotional and the rational side by side.
No, it's tricky, and I think a lot of fans wrestle with it. I think a lot of Newcastle fans wrestle with it maybe more than they'll admit, or that they want to kind of acknowledge. It's a complicated thing. I have no strong views on Newcastle as a club other than a general kind of delight in I quite like seeing big crowds celebrate. That's a bit of a thing for me, and Wembley yesterday didn't let anybody down in that regard.
Is that a hobby, Raw, for you?
I just think that's one of the most magical things in football, is seeing a crowd melt. I really like it. It's one of the things that you get tired of football after a while. You get to kind of April, May in the season, you're there's more football matches on. But then you see a big crowd melt and a team celebrate something that it's not celebrated before. You see a city go wild, and it's really hard not to kind of smile at it. So I'm pleased for my friends who are Newcastle fans, of which there are today annoyingly quite a lot. I'm pleased for my son's friend. My son's got a couple of friends who are Newcastle fans. They're delighted. That's brilliant. I think it's great. I think it's good for the city. I trained in the city as a journalist. I have a little bit of fondness for the city of Newcastle. But at the same time, I'm conscious that that whole team, that city, that club, that institution, what it means, has been co-opted by a nation state that does not ultimately have that team's best interests at heart. It's got its own best interests at heart. The Saudi PIF would dispense with Newcastle if they felt it better suited their investment strategy. That is the reality of football allowing nation states to own football teams, which should never have been allowed to happen. And you have to live with that. You have to find a way to simultaneously feel some kind of vicarious pleasure for the people of Newcastle, and they've waited long enough. It's a brilliant thing to be able to celebrate, with being slightly uneasy at seeing how easy it is that a project like that wins quite so much approval. And I think that the complexity of it is part of the reason it works, because it's really hard for people to know, especially the people involved, the fans, to know how they feel about it.
Yeah, I've got to say, as an Everton fan, I found it really overwhelmingly beautiful watching Newcastle win the cup. I couldn't help it. The captain, Bruno Guimaraes, first elite talent brought in by the Saudi owners. He's been a warrior for that club. Talks about Newcastle as a second home. I loved what he said on Friday, how he's visualised, like Mo Salah visualises scoring goals. He's visualised walking up the Wembley steps to collect the trophy. He said, I've done it so many times. And to see him actually do it was really meaningful. But Raw, we've got to talk about Liverpool.
Do we have to?
I'm saying this objectively, with no malice. An awful week continues. Carabao Cup defeat, following that Champions League agony at Anfield. Really, 6 days of blemish. Big picture in a season forged from dreams. I mean, this was Slot's first trip to Wembley. It was heavy-legged. It does mean 2 big losses back-to-back. I do hope a third coming in the imminent derby, which is the next game. But this loss, the Carabao Cup, it's a tchotchke in the scheme of things. But the optics almost outweigh it here. And again, we're talking about the emotional and the rational, because rationally, big picture, I do look at it like a title in Slot's first season is alchemy. Emotionally, though, football is not rational. It's a knee-jerk game. We know this. This season has been so drama-free, as we talked about, for Liverpool Football Club. And it's incredible to me how, the chill wind can flip that narrative from season of miracles and then downgraded by some, or some are trying to downgrade it to, they're not serial winners. They're more beneficiaries of Manchester City having an off-season for the ages. Well, this is the team that is running away from the league. Made the Champions League opening round look like a breeze. Where are we on this? Because I think it's fascinating to see the narrative be almost rewoven overnight.
You'll be unsurprised to learn I've got thoughts on this, Rog. I think there's a modern phenomenon, and I don't know whether this applies. I think my impression is it doesn't apply like this in the States. I think Americans have a different conception of sporting success to European football fans, and it is because there are checks and balances in American sports that make dynasty very difficult. Not impossible, but very difficult. And obviously, the Patriots had one. The Chiefs are in the middle of one, or were in the middle of one. They may yet come back. What you tend not to get in American sports as reliably as you have in European football in the last 25 years is a team that wins everything all of the time. But that is a relatively new thing. For a long, long time, the reason there weren't many doubles, League and Cup doubles, or domestic trebles, or League, Cup and European trebles, is because they're really difficult, particularly in the knockout competitions, because, as Liverpool proved yesterday, you need one bad performance and that's you done. It could come in the final, it could come in the third round, who knows? And in Europe, after a while, you tend to run into some pretty good teams, and if you're not on it, or if they're better than you, you lose. But we've become so used, I think, in the last 10, 15 years to seeing teams compete for doubles and trebles and quadruples, that is now treated as though it's the bar, but it's not the bar. Those things are almost impossible to do. They're incredibly rare, and so I've seen it described several times actually in the last few days as PSG meaning the end of Liverpool's treble hopes, or yesterday meaning the end of Liverpool's treble hopes. And you think, well, I'm not sure it's fair to chastise a team for not winning absolutely everything. That has never been how we've judged things. So in terms of what that result yesterday means, I think we have to wait until the end of the season. If that's a harbinger of Liverpool collapsing to blow the league, then it's really significant. If it's a blip and Liverpool get over the line in early May and win the title, if I'm completely honest, I'm not sure anybody will remember that Arne Slot lost the Carabao Cup final.
Is any part of you worried that you're not going to win the league?
Yeah, because I think it would be weird as a fan if you weren't. I can see I think it's unlikely that Liverpool lose 5 games in a row, but I can see a world in which there's a couple of draws, including with Everton in the derby, and all of a sudden everything gets very nervy because 8 points is a lot, but it doesn't take much for it to be 5, and 5 points is not that many, especially given that Liverpool still have to play Arsenal. So, although I think it is overwhelmingly likely that Liverpool will get over the line, I am a bit worried that, if they draw with Everton and draw with Fulham, then suddenly, or lose at Fulham, lose to Everton, drop points in those first couple of games back after the international break, then suddenly it is slightly more tense than would be ideal. Would quite like Arsenal not to have won yesterday. They should get over the line, and I think if they do...
I'm interested.
Then this becomes losing the Carabao Cup becomes a sort of unfortunate blemish. That said, the other thing that I think is significant about that result yesterday and the result against PSG is Liverpool took a big risk appointing Arne Slot. He hadn't managed an elite Champions League team previously. He was still at the start of his career. Feyenoord is a big club, a huge historic club, but the level of players, the level of expectation.
Yeah, it's a big club in Feyenoord.
It's a big club in Rotterdam.
Yeah.
It's in Feyenoord historically are a big team, but it's a different level of expectation to Liverpool. And I think what you've seen in the last few days is the flip side to all the benefits Liverpool have seen. Slot has put together a brilliant campaign in the league. It's been, as you say, dreamlike. But against one of the best teams in the world, one of the best coaches in the world, he fell short. He was outcoached by Luis Enrique. And yesterday in a major final against a really good team, he couldn't solve the problems that he was presented with. And that might be to do with squad rotation and squad management, might also be tactical. But that's the risk Liverpool took when they appointed Arne Slot, that he's not someone who's got a track record of winning those major finals. And he has to learn how to do it. And maybe you don't do it first time. That's okay. That's not a problem. It was always going to be very unlikely that Liverpool had, at Feyenoord, discovered a manager who could just come in and win every single thing straight away.
I mean, that's insane. I mean, I will say, I don't know if you know this, Ru, I'm not a Liverpool fan.
You hide it very well.
I know. I'm objective and I'm very neutral in my analysis. But, look, there's a temptation in our society, social media propelled reality. We cannot allow people to have nice things. We cannot allow people to have joy. We like to strangle other people's joy. And I'm watching this in the last 18 hours with Liverpool fans. We have to create. You cannot have your joy. This is our little crevice to rip open and make you feel as crap as we're all feeling. I'll just say this honestly. I can't believe I'm saying this. Liverpool fans, you know that I'm a horrible person. But trust me when I say this. I know it's been a terrible week, a hard week, a frustrating week, a disappointing week. But do not meet the temptation to shift from joy to almost self-flagellation. And fretting about the players that now need to be got rid, the areas that need to be strengthened. I really believe this. What Arne Slot has done, I've said this many times, as a transformational leader in his first season is nothing short of, honestly, alchemic. And I just hope that you can continue to marvel at it and savour it.
I think that's absolutely right. It strikes me as being...
I can't believe I just said that.
It's a really modern football thing.
It's a world thing. You cannot. It's a British thing. You have to make people feel crap about themselves when they're feeling joy. You've got to it's an opportunity to crap on their joy. Let's do it.
But it's also it's set up so that everybody fails all of the time. That unless you win the quadruple, there is always a question mark. And I think to an extent that's a construct of a media that piggybacks on football in the way that it does. It's such a sort of driver of interest that it's much better. It's quite hard if just like Liverpool have won the league and that's really good, well done, is not nearly as interesting as Liverpool must improve after losing the Carabao Cup final. But I'm going to give the final word on this, Rog, to my son.
Please.
So as we stayed until the end of the game, he did say after about 85 minutes, "Daddy, should we go?" Just people were starting to leave, and I said, "No, you always stay until the end." because you clap your team off
For the
and
fighting.
you stay until the end, and you boo Alexander Isak. No,
Yeah,
you
stay
clap
for the
your
fighting,
team off.
son. That's why we came.
So we were queuing to get out of Wembley, and you have to wait obviously in the row, and you got the steps, and we were right at the top. And I turned to him and said, he was holding my hand, as he'd been told, always hold my hand in a crowd. And I said, "Are you feeling it? Are you okay, mate? Are you okay?" And he went, "Well, I'm a bit wibbly wobbly." And I thought that's really heartbreaking. And you could hear people go, like that around him. And then as we got out of the stairwell and onto the concourse, you heard people start singing, and they were singing, "Now You're Gonna Believe Us, We're Gonna Win the League." And they sang it all the way down the steps, and the 5-6 flights of steps out into the night sky around Wembley. And I looked down when the singing stopped and we were walking towards the station. I looked down at him and he was smiling again. And I think that is Liverpool fans' reaction to yesterday. God. If they get over the line in the league, that's all that matters.
Oh, Ro, that is so beautiful. I'm so glad you both told us that story and had that moment. You said, I've taken my kids to Wembley twice to watch Everton in their lifetimes. The last time was for an FA Cup semi-final, which we scored first against Liverpool and just self-destructed and lost. And our leaving memory, when my kids were similarly shattered, similarly wibbly-wobbly, was to walk past a very large Everton fan wearing a T-shirt that said, "Everton's born, not manufactured." A very, very large man urinating against the side of Wembley. And as my youngest son, who was then 4, walked past him, he just said, "Why do they always effing find a way to do us?" So your son's final memory, uplifting in defeat. Mine, slightly different. Why is he urinating against the side of the building, Dad? I think was the first question he asked.
To be fair,
that's what we do, son. Knobs out.
We walked to Wembley Central rather than Wembley Park. Wembley Park is the main one at the top of Wembley Way. Yeah. Wembley Central is about 10-15 minutes away. And we got down this little side street to get the back entrance to the station, and there was a big kind of old abandoned warehouse with a load of people standing outside urinating. And Ed went, "Oh, Dad, that's good, isn't it? They've got little walls where you can go to the toilet."
Little walls. And that is why Wembley is such a vaunted stadium. That's the tradition, Americans. When you get over... By the way, we've just unleashed thousands of Americans who will go over to Wembley in the years to come and will just think you can just urinate everywhere. Please don't do it, America.
It's a free zone.
By the way, also sponsors listening are thinking, maybe we can sponsor that activation. Walls where you just urinate outside the stadium is brought to you by Pennzoil.
Surely it's one for... Do you have tenor in America? Is that an American thing?
Not yet. Should we? What is it?
The adult... what's the word? Leakage pants? Surely they sponsor a urination wall. Tenor man.
You're talking about adult diapers?
I mean, I don't want to use that word. It sounds pejorative. People have bladder issues. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
But yes,
welcome.
Those.
There you go. God bless. We've gone very deep on that issue, so I'm just going to say, away the lads. So happy for Darren Eales, who ran Atlanta United, became the CEO of Newcastle, is currently battling a rare form of blood cancer. It was lovely to watch him post himself going to bed with a trophy last night. And Godspeed also to my friend Ray Hudson, who was 2 bottles in when I texted him last night, and he deserves this joy as much as anyone. Raw. Back to the Premier League, where Liverpool are top. For Arsenal 1, Chelsea 0. North London against West London, a historic rivalry. The club separated currently by 6 miles, 6 points, 2 places in the league. The big news going in, Cole Palmer out with a, quote, injury in training. Maresca admitted he'd missed the penalty last week because he was suffering from diarrhea and a fever, which is too much information, Enzo.
It's a miracle he took the penalty. That situation.
What were those diapers called?
Tenor.
Yeah, I think Cole Palmer's trademark lawyers are going to get in there and own the Tenor brand. Reece James went into midfield. Honestly, Chelsea struggled for, pretty much the entire game to keep hold of possession, do anything meaningful. When they had the ball, they lacked any kind of an option going forward. No real target, no real outcome or even process. Arsenal tried to purr from the outset. I think for long spells, Chelsea's dodgy keeper, Robert Sanchez, occasionally looked like their most creative player. Chelsea really just kept in it by Arsenal's bluntness and Cucurella's sly, cunning arms in the area. But one of the most fascinating and curious storylines of the season, we think of Arsenal, we think of set pieces. We've sung ballads about their set-piece coach, Nicolas Jova. And that potent playbook that he's developed for corners, which has not been seen since, I think, the Roman Legion had all their formations, Repelle, Equites, the square formation, Ordebem, Formate, and my favourite, Testudinem Formate, the tortoise formation. I know that Scott McTominay probably knows all about these. But Raw, opponents have found them out. That's the honest story. Incredibly, Arsenal had not scored, I think, in 54 corners. So Q, surprise, 20 minutes. Ødegaard swung one in. Marino, Timo Giroud. Actually, Timo Giroud is probably Giroud himself right now. So let's just say new and improved Giroud, artfully flicked on. A looping header that went over the outstretched hand of the misplaced Sanchez, I think you could say. 5th goal of the season for makeshift striker Marino. Can you believe it, Raw? This was Arsenal's first goal from a corner since December.
But that's relatively in keeping with the general statistics of corners. So it's 1 in 55, that would have been, which... Yeah, that's about right, I think. That's as many corners. I think you generally need 10 to create a chance, and maybe another of those 10 chances you then need, another 1 to score a goal. So it does suggest that Arsenal have kind of reverted to the mean a little bit, and maybe in the case that what they were doing before was, they were benefiting because a lot of the routines were unfamiliar. Now that teams are forewarned about what's going to happen, it's a little bit like Nicholas Jover's magic trick has lost a little bit of its
He had
luster.
one trick, which was to get Ben White to undo the goalkeeper's gloves before the corner was taken. Is that what you're saying?
There was the thing
Not
where
to
they were
put
running
words in your mouth, Rob.
There was the thing where they were running in from the far post, which I think really confused people about how you stop it. But then, as with and this is no slight on Nicholas Jover, as with every innovation, all of the other teams in the Premier League have spent quite a lot of time and energy trying to work out an antidote, and it would suggest that they found them. So Arsenal will still score from corners, but maybe not at a rate that's any greater than anybody else.
So the drawing board for Jover, he's going to have Gabriel just pull a little ball out of his mouth before the corner's taken and present it to the defender. Start pulling like lots of coloured cloths out of his ear just to cannot wait for the next iteration. Get on it, Jover. Chelsea, got to say, look miserable throughout this game. Caicedo, Fernandes, fortune spent on them. Look like, honestly, counterfeit versions of themselves. Sancho listless. Just a lack of energy or motivation. At times, effort. By the way, which is shocking because they are so much in the heat of the Champions League battle. Their best attack first half was Fofana attempting to stick his entire foot up Declan Rice's bum, which VAR okayed, I think it was Arsenal. Honestly, weird to watch them. Raw, 4th place team, slow and ponderous football, lacking in pace or guile. Or even physicality. You could say that's proof that no amount of money can buy you ideas and imagination, but it was pretty awful to watch. The second half was just like a lukewarm bath of football. And you kind of got to understand why, despite his early success, despite the league position, that there is this sense of alienation and frustration between the Chelsea fans, who are a demanding bunch, and Enzo Maresca, who's got the team chasing where they should be, but doing it without... Well, we've really only flat football in since Christmas, or even players willing to take shots.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Because if they'd won Chelsea this game, they'd have been 3 points behind Arsenal, and 3 points over the course of a season is not very many points. And yet, Arsenal's season has been spent chasing the title, and Chelsea's season has, apart from about 2 months, been spent in crisis. And I'm not quite sure how those two things can both be true, because they seem to have not had hugely divergent seasons. Chelsea, I think, hit a purple patch late October into December, and they've been trading on that basically ever since. That spell where Palmer was unplayable and Nicholas Jackson was scoring goals and the defence seemed resolute and you tipped them for the title. I said Arsenal. The drop-off is astonishing. It's really hard to know whether it's Maresca only having one approach. I think at Leicester, if you speak to people at Leicester, they said that although they got promoted, obviously, in spectacular style, huge number of points, that as the season wore on, results dwindled and dwindled and dwindled, and by the end, it felt as though, other teams have worked us out. That process is much quicker in the Premier League because of the quality of opponents that you're facing. And it does look like he has been asked by the rest of the Premier League, right, you've done that, what's your plan B? What's your next trick? And he's not been able to find it. But also all of that stuff we've talked about with Chelsea for so long, the listlessness, the sense that this isn't so much a team as a kind of asset portfolio, they looked like the opposite of Newcastle in terms of identity. Newcastle have a core identity, a thing they do really well. I have no idea what this Chelsea are meant to be. That was always the accusation at the start of the season, that there were too many players, they were too active in the transfer market, that it was too fluid a situation. Now, after that little purple patch in the autumn, it looks exactly the same. They look as they have for so long. They look lost.
Great treat from Con CFC. Don't worry, Chelsea have spent $77 million on teenagers. You ain't ready for us in 2030. Arteta's dead body keeps on keeping on. Just a win. Fairly underwhelming. First win actually in 4 league games. 12 points off the top. I'd say a gesture of being in the right direction, but it was fairly unconvincing. You saw that in the little celebration for the players at the final whistle. And the whole game, Arsenal-Chelsea, which conjured such heavyweight images of classics past, was really a shadow of itself. By the way, nice to note, Miles Lewis-Skelly got an England call-up aged 18. Life, I do believe this sincerely, in 2025 is about finding the gemstone moments when you've got them and celebrating them. That is definitely one of them. And talking of gemstones, up the Seagulls. Manchester City 2, Brighton 2. City actually entered this just 1 point above the plucky lads from Hove, who were on a run of 6 straight wins, all comps. This game, about as close as we'll ever get to the creation of the Champions League playoffs trademark, which sounds like something straight from Todd Burley's mind. We'll get it sponsored by someone like Red Lobster at the half or whatever. In a crucial game, it was actually stunning from a City perspective to see Foden, Bernardo Silva, Jack Grealish, KDB all on the bench, but they still took the lead from the penalty spot within 11 minutes. Erling Haaland raw. That gent who we still believe is part AI in cleats became the first Premier League player to reach 100 goal contributions. That's goals and assists in fewer than 100 games. He did it in 94 matches. Previous record holder Alan Shearer, who took 100 games to reach that level. 84 goals, 16 assists for Erling. This was his 21st league goal of the season, 29 all comps raw. And the funny thing is, it's seen or derided as an off-season by many.
Yeah, he is the one player who has kind of delivered for City this season. I think there have been moments where he's been relatively quiet, Haaland, because of the lack of kind of zip and zest in the rest of the team. But in terms of his output, his raw output, he's not really dipped. And if this is a dip, then it's terrifying to think what comes next.
News last week that we need to mention, because I love this. Norway's latest great tourist attraction has just opened. Did you hear this, Ro?
I did not. Go on.
This is another one for you to go to. It's called the Haaland Safari in his hometown of Bryn. It's local football club, Bryn FK, I think they're called. You can stay at the Haaland suite of the local hotel. I'll give it a plug. It's the Jaren. You get like the cold blast of the North Sea rolling in. It just sounds a bit, well, both half-assed and magnificent in equal measure, but it does make me wonder, which player would you most like to go to an amusement park based on them? And why is it James Tarkowski?
The Haaland Safari sounds a bit like it should be more like Jurassic Park, where you drive through in an open-top Jeep and there are just large Norwegian strikers roaming the fields. That's what I'd expect from a Haaland Safari. I don't just want a themed suite.
I never thought, how funny it is that they decided it was a safari. It was not just like the Haaland tour, like the Beatles tour in Liverpool. But no, Haaland, when you think of Haaland, you think of safaris. Yes, like Jurassic Park, where like you're driving along in your little Jeep and then a huge animal just pounces on it and rips the roof off with its teeth.
Trying to think you should be driving along a little Jeep by a fence.
Yeah.
And then you just see this enormous striker eating trees like a giraffe. That's what I want from my...
Chopping wood, making dams with its dad for beavers.
Exactly.
I'd love it. By the way, I've taught myself we are going raw. If football had an off-season, I would take a break and come with it. But I do like this idea, and I'm going to get to work on it on a James Tarkowski safari. I think it would be effing-leavable.
That would be risky given in the fabled... show that James Tarkowski took part in along with Riyad Mahrez about...
Yes. It's the game, innit?
It's part of the game, innit? James Tarkowski's wife revealed what their preferred leisure activity is, and I'm not sure it's the sort of thing that features on a safari.
That was amazing. It would be a bit like HBO After Dark. I just thought it would be more like you come in, you get given, when you buy a ticket, you get given 20 cigarettes to puff on. You immediately go into the first room, get a punch in the face, But then like the pies on offer at the gift shop at the end of it all just make it just a 5-star experience. I am going to get on that. Everton, if you're listening, I think that is a way to lure more tourists to the stadium next season. But for Brighton, back to the game, Estupiñán equalised. First goal of the season. Incredible lethal long-range free kick. Ederson out with an abdominal strain. Ortega seemed to think the free kick was going wide and just watched it fly in, which is incredible, Raw. Last time City conceded from a direct free kick at home was 2013. Even Nicholas Jova would say, wow, right?
Do you think that Ortega thought it was going wide?
Yeah. What do you think he was doing? Do you think he was just thinking about the Haaland Safari and whether it should just be called the Haaland Hall of Fame or the Haaland Museum?
It looked a bit like he'd been on a James Tarkovsky safari and seen some stuff. It was clearly a misread.
Yeah.
Watching it was really weird that he clearly decided it was going wide. Even it didn't seem to move that much. I mean, it obviously bent in, but it wasn't like it started way outside the far post. It was a very odd, odd goal.
It was like an EA Sports FIFA malfunction, but the rest of the game was about new City January signings scoring either side at half-time. Marmoush gave the goalkeeper the eyes, lashed stunningly from mid-range. That's what he does. And then poor Kuzanov, the Uzbek defender with the sad eyes, seems to be as a defender, almost like a Greek myth creation, half footballer, half lolscat meme. He tummied home an own goal off his tum-tum. No doubt, I like to think of his tum-tum full of plov and shashlik. God, he's so doleful. It really is heartbreaking. Big point for plucky little City. Brighton remained 6 undefeated in the league, create the best chances. Belieber will just agonise over an open chance he blew over the bar headlessly. They won the XG 2.51 to 1.71. They mined those wings. Honestly, sign of seagull process, how angry they were only to draw at City, not get their first ever win there and their first ever double. 3 shots only on target at home for Pep's mob. Remain in 5th place. 7th place Brighton behind them by a single point. I think the real winners of this one were Forest ahead of them and Newcastle sandwiched in there like pie filling. To West London, the posh Hugh Grant parts for Fulham 2, Tottenham 0. Highlight of a dire first half, really. Raw, the Raul Jimenez dive. We got to talk about it. If you didn't see it, it was grazed in the back by Jed Spence, and he just, I don't know how you'd describe it, Raw. It's less a dive. It was like almost just elite physical. It was like seeing a Mexican Mr. Bean-esque level of physical comedy.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to dive, you need to do it more. There's an art to diving. You have to practice it, and obviously Raul has been a little bit too honest in his career. He needs to. Maybe he's hoping to add it to his skill set for the autumn of his career.
He's just a Mexican Ashley Young. Game came alive second half. By the way, 36-year-old Willian. I think it was his first start in his second coming for Fulham. Magnificent. Loving his football. But Fulham boss Marco Silva, he's used the second most substitutes this season. He's conjured the second most goals from those changes. Bournemouth, I believe, are still top. And it was Brazilian striker Rodrigo Muniz in off the bench who wielded the dagger, finished sharply after Odegaard coughed at the ball. God bless Tottenham's chaotic defending. Almost their dogged determination not to clear the ball when they were gifted many chances. Then there was a lovely moment. Ryan Sessegnon icing the game with an ecstatic curling finish to humiliate poor defending from Ben Davies, and then revelled against a team. I think you could safely say there were 5 miserable years in his prime. He spent at Tottenham, this Fulham, almost a fallen star boy when he came through, to come back to Fulham to score in front of the Hammersmith end against the club that dumped him. By the way, not just to score a goal, but to give his team a true Champions League chance. It must have felt epic, and even more so in this Premier League Raw, where the results for Manchester United, Spurs and Chelsea in their Thursday European games now make it almost impossible, I believe, for Spain, Italy to catch England in the coefficient rankings. Coefficients, they're why we watch. So there is a 5th Champions League spot almost definite now, and you got to think, if you're Fulham, you're like, I'm just saying, Raw.
Yeah, it's in play, and that's incredible. That's been the hallmark of this season, I think, is that sense that anybody can beat anybody, that nothing is certain, nothing is set. The gaps between the teams that we think of as traditional title contenders and kind of the upper middle class have all but collapsed. And Fulham are going into the end of this season with a shot of finishing, maybe not 4th, but certainly 5th. And as you say, that would be enough for the Champions League, which for Fulham would be extraordinary.
Extraordinary. For Spurs, we've got to touch on them quickly. Not a lot to take from this, other than it was lovely to watch 19-year-old Archie Gray play, in his real position of midfield, starting there for the first time. He looked accomplished. Other than that, they're now in 14th place. They've not been out of the top 8 since 2008. 15 losses is the motif. Only the bottom 4 have more this season. Their injuries are clearing up. That's the good news. But Ange did not start Sonny, James Maddison and Mickey van der Ven. Kind of feels that the Europa League, Raw, is now his everything. That's almost the calculation he's making, that the Europa League is the phone a friend to keep a job lifeline.
Without question, I think there's a very good chance that we are in the last few months of Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham reign. Anyway, I think there's probably I think the likelihood is that this summer begins how would we phrase this? Like the exile of the Postecoglouites. What's the biblical phrase for it?
Oh my God.
Even with a son who's given up juice for Lent, I don't have enough Bible in me to be certain. But anyway, the Postecoglouites are in for a bit of a rough time. In
the Bible, would the earth not open up and they'd sink in whole and then the earth would close over them?
That's a bit more like Dune than the Bible, Rog, if I'm honest.
No, they're not the same.
Or like Tron.
Is Dune not the third book of the Bible? Prove me different. I've got a theory, but go on, keep going, Rob.
What's the bidworm? What's the bidworm in Tron called?
I don't know. Was it Sodom and Gomorrah?
No,
or
that's
I'm
in the
mixing them
Bible.
all up.
What's the thing?
We should start a new feature in the show. Is it Jude or the Bible?
What's
the
one?
Judge.
What's the one where there's a big worm with teeth that's in the desert? Is that Star Wars? Is it Dune or is it Tron?
It's Lowly the Worm. It's Richard Scary Books.
No.
What?
Rod, you're not being helpful. Come on.
No,
Star Wars big worm.
Or...
It's the Sarlacc. Is what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of the Sarlacc. Hang on.
Sarlacc sounds like somebody that Nottingham Forest would sign as a defender.
There's a Norwegian backup striker at Atletico Madrid. Rog, there's no Sarlacc in the Bible. That's not how that works.
That's why it never caught on.
Exactly, plot holes all over the shop. I think it's not too much of an exaggeration to say the one thing that can save Postecoglou is winning the Europa League, which gets Spurs into the Champions League. That might just keep him in a job, but even then, I'm not certain.
I'm rooting for you, Big Ange. I've got that religion. I am a Postecoglouite, and I know a lot of you are out there just for the joy he brings. Leicester 0, Manchester United 3. Talking about joy. United beat the Foxes for the 4th time this season. Game itself was fairly pedestrian and not of note, apart from its ludicrous late kick-off time on a Sunday. And poor Højlund, first goal in 21 games, freed by Bruno, who else lashed it at speed from the corner of the 6-yard box through 2 flailing Leicester defenders. I think 99 agonising days since his last goal, 22 hours and 12 minutes of football that had been blank, really an eternity for a young striker. Raw, you know the rules of football. When Højlund scores on you, aren't you immediately relegated?
In Leicester's case, in effect, yes, Rog.
I don't make the rules up, Leicester.
That's just how it works.
Yeah, by the way, Garnacho also ended his 25-game stretch without a goal, and United fans spent the entire second half just chanting for Ruud van Nistelrooy, as well they would, because God bless him. First ever top-flight team, his Leicester, to lose 7 consecutive home fixtures without scoring a single bloody goal. I feel for Leicester fans. That is a record dating back to 1888, which was 9 years after the light bulb was invented. So it's not a lost season of accomplishment after all, is it? We have to touch quickly, Raw, on the quite huge noise last week, quasi-ridiculous, Sir Jim Ratcliffe choosing to go on a charm offensive. I think I use the word charm very loosely here. Speaking to the media, claiming amongst other things that his squad is overpaid and not good enough. He referenced Casemiro, Højlund, Onana, Anthony and Jadon Sancho. Both forgetting that he's greenlit over $200 million worth of players who made largely no impact, and then forcing his manager and his own players to respond against him. Also talked about how the club was on a tear to be running out of cash by Christmas if it had not implemented a major redundancy and cost-cutting plan. That was out of one side of his mouth. The other was talking about the unveiling of a $2.6 billion plan for a new stadium, dubbed, quote, the Eiffel Tower of the North. I don't know either. A vast new redevelopment that looked very tent-like. I think a big top is pretty fitting for football's ultimate circus of a club. Raises a lot of questions. about whether trying to fund the thing will further weaken the club product on the field, the competitiveness. But Raw, what do you make of it all? Is it at the end of the day just kind of like PR mirage, this beautiful architect's vision intended to project a brave new future that may never leave the page?
Well, I think the main thing you can take from the drawings, if anyone's seen the actual kind of architect's drawings, is that Foster and Partners, the architects who drew them up, would really like a bit of work on the Saudi World Cup in 2034, please. That was very clearly the inspiration for that stadium design. I was surprised by the allegation from Ratcliffe that United would have run out of money by December 2025 anyway. I don't really understand how that happens, because they have a huge amount of income and a massive commercial operation. I don't understand why sacking lots of staff on kind of, perfectly normal salaries of 35, 40, 50,000 pounds a year makes up for paying off Dan Ashworth, who you hired, then fired within the space of 6 months, and will have cost you several £1 million. Same with Eric Ten Hag. I don't see how any of this makes a dent into the playing budget, which is, he's right, completely overstuffed and overinflated. But I particularly don't understand how all of that can be true, and yet you also think you're going to build a £2 billion stadium. The whole thing feels like it's not really been fact-checked, if I'm honest. That was my main takeaway. I don't quite understand where a lot of these ideas are coming from. Manchester United do need a new stadium. I don't know if they need a 100,000-seat stadium, and I don't think... It doesn't sound like they've got £2 billion to pay for it, so I'm not quite sure what the purpose of it all is.
Raw's got questions, is all I will say. We actually got a brilliant phone call from on our Friday preview show this week from a Tulane architecture professor, Emily Taylor-Welty. I really encourage you to listen to it, because it was beautifully written. She had a beautiful line where she said, for me, there's a poetry in materials and how they come together to make spaces, and yet buildings are so much more than that. Whether it's a house or football stadium, it represents how we see ourselves, how we want others to perceive us. They hold our memories, our dreams, and our hubris. I just say there's a lot of hubris in their vision that we saw unveiled last week. Raw. Quickly into other games. Ipswich 2, Nottingham Forest 4. Second collision between trees and tractors in just 12 days. Forest won the first clash, the FA Cup, and again delivered victory for arboriculture over agriculture once again. Poor Ipswich. By the way, I do love Ipswich. They are so plucky. They try so bloody hard, but they also just have 2 points out their last 27 and are still the only team in England's total football tierage without a single league win this calendar year. And the gaping chasm between these two clubs probably best summed up by Rebecca Lowe at half-time when she said, Ipswich headed to the Championship. Nottingham Forest are on the way to the Champions League, which they almost certainly are after scoring 3 times in a potent 7-minute spell in the first half. They now 4 points off Arsenal in second, 5 ahead of Chelsea in fourth. FA Cup quarters against Brighton coming up, giving hope, honestly, to all football fans of what their club could one day experience. Ipswich, meanwhile, lose their fourth on the spin, 9 points behind Wolves, who we'll talk about in one moment. I do want to discuss Bournemouth 1, Brentford 2, Raw, because that's another team that I love, and that may be cursed with my love. The Golden War Cherries of Bournemouth. Slight feeling it's Cinderella pumpkin time. They entered having lost 2 home games on the run without scoring, and they let Brentford come from behind to win here. That despite running the game. They really bossed it. Iraola, frustrated post-game. He said, we need to create a lot of chances. Other teams like Brentford need fewer chances to score. They're just more efficient than us. I love this Bournemouth team. They're everything that's good about football to me. I think they are one of the greatest stories of the season still. I'm almost mourning them in the present, because I've got a feeling they're going to be broken up at the end of this season. But this sudden struggle, 3 consecutive home defeats, 4 losses in the last 6, just 4 points since the start of February now. I think only the bottom 3 have plucked less. Is it exhaustion? Is it just a massive injury list finally taking a toll? Is it maybe mental pressure that they felt that high up in the table? I know a European spot's still possible, but can they we've seen them shock United, Newcastle, smash Nottingham Forest. Where's that ruthlessness suddenly gone?
I think in a beautiful kind of structured way, they actually tie together quite a lot of the threads that we've been talking about with other teams. There is clearly an exhaustion thing, same as Liverpool. I think there's an injury list thing, same as Arsenal. They got through a lot of games where they were playing, I think they only had 11 or 12 fit senior players, and if you looked at the bench, it was just kids. And they got through all of those games, but then there is a lag effect. So once they've got through those games, it now looks like they're paying the price for that. Fatigue doesn't work kind of to order. It's not something you can command to happen at a certain time. They're kind of proof of how balanced this Premier League is, and they've seen the good side of that in the run up to 4th and 5th in the table. They're now maybe seeing the bad side of it because they are playing teams, dominating them often and losing games. But I think they can take a bit of inspiration maybe from Forest, funnily enough, who are the other team that qualifies story of the season. There was a point about a month ago where you looked at Forest and thought, okay, not their race is run, but they're kind of they're gonna have to hang on to a Champions League spot and hope they don't get caught by the big boys lining up behind them. It reminded me of I watched quite a lot of cycling in the summer and don't much in the winter. And you quite often get this scene where someone will have spent 200 kilometres on their bike all alone at the head of the field, and the big teams in the peloton will kind of chase them down, and they'll come around that final corner and you'll see this one guy, and then in the back this massed rank of all these people going much faster, and they're going to be swallowed up. And you kind of looked at Forest and thought, yeah, this is what's going to happen. They're going to see if they can keep their noses out ahead to get into the Champions League for long enough. They've had a second wind. They scored 4 at Ipswich. They suddenly look like themselves again. They're even a little bit more expansive and adventurous in the way they're playing. I do wonder whether after the international break, Bournemouth might be able to find a second wind. Because I agree, they've been up there with Forest as one of the stories of the season.
Godspeed. And I think we're going to be at that very next game, spending time with Iraola, who I do think is just a beacon of human wonder. Just a little bit further over, along the south cliffs of England, Southampton 1, Wolves 2. Southampton, let's just say they're edging Derby's lowest ever Premier League points total of 11. They stay stuck on 9. Feels like that's honestly the only intriguing story left in the relegation races, as Wolves celebrated at the final whistle as if this win was their reprieve from the executioner's gallows. 2 goals from Norwegian giant Jørgen Strand Larsen, first since December for him, did the Bears. But I've got to say, it has been incredible watching Wolves. Remember, this team had lost 11 of their 16 games this season, and then Vitor Pereira arrived in December. At his press conference, he said, "I will guide them like a tactical GPS," which I just love, like a tactical GPS, to point them in the same direction. 85 days later, his unheralded team have won 17 of their 26 points in his 13 games in charge. They're now 9 points clear of the relegation zone. Raw, not a lot talking about it, but it is a breathtaking act of turnaround leadership.
Yeah, he's done brilliantly, Pereira, and I think there's a temptation to maybe underestimate the experience that he's got, the fact that he's been around the block a long time. He's worked in some difficult places. He's worked at some big teams, especially FC Porto in Portugal. He clearly knows what he's doing. I don't think he's a kind of Pep Guardiola reinvent the game type manager, but he is very clearly a more than competent pair of hands, a bit of a disciplinarian, which I think was crucial. And he's given the team structure and organisation, and he's made them look like, to be honest, what Wolves always were, which was a really solid Premier League team. Not spectacular necessarily, but more than good enough to stay in the division, and they will do it comfortably. I
loved what he said at the fun. They asked him, "What are you going to do?" He said, "I'm going to go to the pub with the fans. God bless you, sir." And as I always say, let's save the rest till last. Everton won, West Ham won, a game which meant nothing and everything. Both teams safe, nothing to play for apart from revenge. St. David Moyes welcoming the Hammers, for whom he delivered European glory, but they then let him go. I said this in our newsletter on Friday, that watching Moyes come back to us and almost finding love again. It's like watching a middle-aged man who's reunited with his high school girlfriend via Facebook, which is a bit of a creepy analogy. But so it was. 5 games left at Goodison to go and counting. The game was a bit of a snooze. 15th against 16th, they'll do that to you. West Ham opened the scoring with their one moment of quality. Bowen always does us, so does Souček. His first touch, his body adjustment, opening up the dagger. Really, it was breathtaking. And I told myself while I was watching, it doesn't matter, none of this matters, but my God, 91st minute, when Garner Gay created the equaliser with this is a phenomenal moment, just quite instinctive, first time, on the stretch, on the volley, just a pinpoint cross with power that pinged off the beautiful, beautiful head of sex god Jake O'Brien. By the way, thank you, Daichi, for keeping Jake O'Brien box fresh just for Moyes. When that ball went in, Raw, I realised how much I was lying to myself about not caring. Oh my God, I wanted it so badly.
And this is the thing, isn't it? That even though the game is meaningless, there's nothing really resting on it for either team. The game itself is a thing to be won or drawn. Defeat is a thing to be avoided in the moment. You are living kind of the purest football in life, Rog. You're just enjoying the games as they come.
As the great philosopher Riyad Mahrez once said.
It's part of the game, innit?
By the way, we could have won that part of the game. Alcaraz, God bless, could have won it late. Body shape all wrong. Didn't matter. 9 unbeaten in the Premier League going back to 2017. That is the best we have had. GFOP at Stretchhead on our Insta posted the truth. It does feel slightly good being an Evertonian again. I love that. Slightly good. The belief, honestly, is what's making me feel so good. That's what's changed under St. David. Last word to at Garth Corneveau, who tweeted and said, raise my third first beverage of the day to Rog Bennett for securing another Premier League season of hope and heartbreak to come. By the way, Garth, the football may not always be poetic at Everton, but the crack is at 90. Liverpool next, then Arsenal, Forest, Manchester City, Chelsea. Buckle up, Blues! You ready for the derby, aren't you, Ro?
I am dreading the derby, Rog. I am dreading the derby. I would take a draw now.
Bite your arm off to a 2-0 loss. I've got to be candid. Let's finish with a letter from our quite bulging mailbag. I will say we've had many beautiful ravens sent to us at meninblazers@gmail.com. Keep them coming. But this one from the mighty Caleb Schrockhurst blew me away, moved me so deeply. A letter did have a coda asking about players and the apparent lack of middle and upper class footballers, which we can answer at any time. But it was the meat of the letter, Raw, which moved me more than I can say. Please do the honours.
So it starts, hello, Rog and Rory. I hope this raven finds you well. I'm a healthy 28-year-old who went to the doctor with a tweaked back last week and came away with a diagnosis of stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. My long-term prognosis is quite good, but no cancer is good cancer. In any case, my treatment means that I'll be riding with Team Bald for the near future. This is quite disturbing, actually, that someone is coming to you for life advice, Roger. This in a way shows the scale of the circumstances. Rog, I know you've flirted with a writing project relating to baldness before. Did that ever come to fruition? Suspect the answer is no, though. I will take as much advice as you and the community can give about losing hair and living the bald life. In my case, I have had a man bun on and off for the last 10 years. Bald may be a... this might be progress. And I'll be making the journey from man bun to full bald within a 6-month period. The Mo Salah, if you will. Thanks for being a light in a dark time. To more days of enjoying every sandwich. Caleb Schrockhurst, Arsenal fan.
Oh, God, Caleb, you beautiful human being. First of all, we do send our love to you. And I'm blown away by you, honestly, as Rory hinted, but I'd say in a nicer way, having the time to write to us at this time of challenge. By the way, take stock from Mo Salah and his miracle. If it can happen to Mo, just a miraculous regrowth. You know what I mean? Hair, it's unpredictable. Roy, you honestly have so much hair. I don't know if you've got anything to say in this moment. You're rubbing, you really are a rub your fringe in our face kind of guy.
I think, obviously I don't know Caleb, but I think there are people who suit baldness. And I think there are also people who can grow into baldness. I've always been afraid of going bald because I think I have a weirdly shaped head. I feel that Caleb will look upon his baldness eventually and realise that actually it suits him rather well.
What shape head would you have, Ro?
I don't know. I just feel you know the aliens from Mars Attacks.
Yeah,
like those guys.
Are you sure? That's your fear?
I think so. I'm not much of a phrenologist because it's.
Do you have baldness in your family?
A lot of baldness. Lot of baldness.
Come on. By the way, if you do have a weird shaped head and you do go bald, you can become a referee. I think you have to become a referee if you've got a weird shaped head. But Caleb, you are right. I was very much in the middle of a book about balding. I loved the title, actually, The Bald Life. I just love that. It was called The Baldening. I'm about 100 people in. It was actually a really fascinating pursuit. But then the US got awarded the World Cup, and I've got to say I don't have a lot of time for anything else right now other than that, counting down 449 days until the World Cup. I will say I learned so much in the process about humanity. It is a traumatic thing for so many human beings. By the way, the one story I love that really I think about a lot was a guy who spent years, he was that kind of guy, a neurotic guy, he self-professed neurotic guy, he spent fortunes, he said, on every single miracle cure. He'd like get, if he read anything, he'd get even illegal ones shipped to him, and spent years, he just got divorced. He was a late 30s gent, he had a comb over. He said it was so complex that he was constantly, when he was in the pub, going to the toilet to make sure all the parts were in the right place. And then just one day, he's just decided on an impulse to shave it all off. And the way he describes the shaving off, it was almost primal, like an animal. He got some clippers from Amazon, ripped the box open, and just in his hallway, just right there, plugged it in. And he said he almost roared like an animal on his hands and knees, howling as he did it. That night, he went out on a date as a new bald. And he said he felt so confident, so powerful, so himself. And he actually, this sounds like a rom-com, but he actually that night ended up meeting his true love as his true self. But you are, it seems, losing your hair, not out of choice or over time, but as a symbol of an agony, a sudden confounding cancer. I can't imagine what that's like. So I'd say, opposite of Rory, I never feared going bald. My dad was bald. His dad was, neither of them gave a crap about it. So I believe this is what I'll say to you. I think beauty is on the inside. It's about who you are as a human being. That will not change, Caleb, because of your hair or the lack of it. And all that matters is that your prognosis is good. So let us know if there's anything we can do to support you or your family in what must be a truly bewilderingly shocking time. And me and everyone at Men in Blazers is there for you, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's all that matters. But Roger, I do have 2 potential titles for your book that I think are better than the bald. A whole new bald game. Does that work?
Oh my God! Sounds like a quiz game on NPR on Saturday afternoon. It's a whole new bald game with your host.
Yeah, it'd be like whether you have to guess whether someone's bald or not. And then the other one I thought might be quite good is Shiny Happy People.
Oh my God! Raw. I'm getting the gang back together. I'm going to get back into this book. In all sincerity, if you do have a great bald story, I would love to hear it. I am fascinated by this moment of complete and utter, often against people's will, this moment of human transformation that is so common. There's 30 million Americans who go bald every year. meninblazers@gmail.com. Send us your bald stories to...
Hang on.
What?
30 million every year?
Yeah.
I don't know if those maths are right, Roger.
Well, look, why? What are you? You think it's more?
No, I think it can't be.
Well, let me ask you this:
How many Americans are there?
But let me ask you: how many times has Wayne Rooney gone bald?
Oh, so you think some of them are multiple bald and it's fine? Yeah,
yes,
fine.
I do. Yeah. I do. Oh, it's happening again. 4th time off to Turkey. By the way, while we're still on Caleb, before I go off on one, because I'm totally moved by your letter to health, strength, love, and the distraction of football. Send us your postal. We will send you a patch. Keep sending your letters, questions for Rory and me to meninblazers@gmail.com. That is it for today. We're off to Los Angeles this week. We're going to CONCACAF it up. That's SoFi for some Nations League gripple grapple. We've got a Jesse Marsh joint dropping midweek and a ton of US men's national team coverage to revel in. We are 449 days from World Cup 2026 and counting. We've got few competitive games to measure ourselves in. Let's savour each and every one together. Raw, thank you, beautiful. Huge love to you, your Crown Prince of Harrogate.
I feel a bit wibbly wobbly.
This is Rog sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. Courage.